Tech and clips.
Yeah. Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. You guys already know that I've been reacting to Ghost and their music, for the past couple of weeks, and I have to say, I can confidently say that I'm a fan, but honestly, I've been listening to the music, but I don't really know the story, so I happened to bump into this video, a brief history of Ghost. Shout outs to Head Stevie, about to take a watch, see what they are all about, their story, from where they began to where they are now. So stick with me to the end of the video. This is like a 31 minutes and 44 seconds, so it's definitely going to be a hell of a ride. Let's watch it together, and definitely tell you guys what I think. Let's go.
If you've been paying attention to the rock and metal scene over the last 10 years, you'll have likely seen a number of artists rise to prominence, and probably an equal number fade into obscurity. However, there is one name above all which is sure to provoke the armchair critics of the music world. Now, whether you love them or hate them, there is no denying that this band have accomplished what very few others have managed to do. Managing to go from strength to strength with each subsequent release, and growing their expanding fan base at an alarming rate. All the while sporting overly dramatic and overt satanic themes. Of course, I'm talking about Ghost.
Yeah.
The story of Ghost can be traced all the way back to 2006, and really even further back than that. Realistically, it's not possible to talk about Ghost without mentioning one very crucial name, Tobias Forge.
Yeah.
Born in Linköping, Sweden, on the 3rd of March 1981, Tobias grew up with his mother and older brother. He was raised on a musical diet of Kiss, Alice Cooper, Pink Floyd and much more. So it's easy to see how the very earliest seeds for Ghost were sown, while Tobias was in his formative years. The age gap between Tobias and his brother Sebastian made their relationship atypical of a usual brotherly bond. Instead, Tobias stated, he was in many ways not a sibling, but a huge idol, a role model. Often he acted as a father as well. We didn't have a large amount of money, but the money we had was spent on culture. It was very rich in culture at home. Art on the walls, music in the speakers, and a lot of books in the shelf that was read and also discussed. Tobias's home life was not the only influence that would later go on to shape his future career. At school, he would often butt heads with an overbearing and overzealous teacher, who would espouse the teachings of Christianity upon him on a weekly basis. With Tobias going on to say, she just represented this sanctimonious authority that I hated. Unfortunately, this clash with religion was not just confined to school. On weekends, Tobias would have to spend time with his father and stepmother. Fulfilling every stereotype of a mean stepmother, she would be very strict with Tobias, ultimately doing so in the name of Christ, further increasing Tobias's distaste for Christianity. Prior to forming Ghost, Tobias was involved in a number of bands, starting with Absurdum in 1994, which would later change name to Superior. This band was influenced by Tobias's love of black metal, and would be the start of many pseudonyms which Tobias would don during his career. In this case, Don Juan Leviathan. After 3 demos, the group disbanded in 1997. This would coincide with Tobias's short stint in the black metal outfit Malign in 1994. Perhaps one of the most notable of Tobias's pre-Ghost projects, Repugnant, have gained a cult following in recent years.
Wow. It's pretty simple. Tobias has been doing this for the longest. Wow.
A death metal project through and through, Repugnant were active between 1994 and 2004, with a short revival in 2010, and would be notable for the origin of Tobias's other pseudonym, Mary Gore. Around 2002 to 2004, the Mary Gore name would crop up once again when Tobias joined Crash Diet. Crash Diet are a glam metal band who are still active today. Tobias's departure from Crash Diet was seemingly prompted by his commitment to Repugnant's 2002 release, project named Magna Carta Cartel was formed. This alt-rock band featured Tobias on guitar and bass, with future Ghost member Martin Persner on vocals, and completed by another future Ghost member, Simon Soderbergh. Magna Carta Cartel would filter out after Ghost came to prominence, but was later resurrected in 2016 without Tobias. 2006 also saw Tobias lead another band called Subvision. This band paid homage to the influences of Blondie, Dead Boys, and many more from the New York punk and new wave scene. Upon reflection, Tobias laments that Subvision was very unfocused, and it was really trying to be too many things. The band also featured the talents of future Ghost members Martin Persner and Gustav Lindström. After Subvision came to a close, or farted out, as Forge states, Ghost as we know it started to form.
Yeah, first album.
According to Tobias, Ghost was officially formed in 2006.
Okay.
This is 4 years prior to their debut album, Opus Eponymous. One of, if not the very first songs written, was Stand By Him, with Tobias later stating that he had just fiddled around and stumbled upon it. The band knew that the aesthetic of the group was incredibly important, and so they spent the best part of 2 years finalising their look before becoming active.
Yeah.
Forge states that he sketched the now iconic Ghost logo while working in a call centre for a mobile phone company, stating, "I was sitting there just wishing for another life." While writing the initial riffs and ideas, which would form the basis of their first album, it was always Tobias's intention to play guitar on the project, rather than sing, even going so far as to contact other vocalists such as Messiah Markelin of Candlemass and J.B. Christopherson of Grand Magus. After having little luck in this regard, Forge decided to power on ahead, knowing that if his vision was to be fulfilled, not only would he have to become the singer himself, but he would also have to become someone else entirely.
Okay. Papa Emeritus.
Adopting the persona of Papa Emeritus I, Tobias Forge set out to make a band which drew on their collective love of traditional heavy metal theatrics, as well as classic horror.
Yeah.
The design of Papa Emeritus was based on the Pope of the Catholic Church, with the flowing chasuble and ornate mitre being a blatant pastiche. Combined with inverted crosses and a latex mask adorned in skull paint, the iconic fictional frontman of Ghost was born. Interestingly, due to the budgetary limits of the band at this time, a standard store-bought old man mask, Walter, was used for the face of Papa.
Wow.
In order to keep anonymous, the live musicians became known as Nameless Ghouls, adopting a similar Italian-inspired horror aesthetic. The look of Ghost was, and still is, deeply rooted in the iconography of the Christian and Catholic Church, with the entire aesthetic being a twisted version of the images which Tobias was exposed to in his younger years. Referring to his mother, he states, "She was always very keen on taking me to churches. She might say now in older age that she's sort of borderline religious, but back then it was just treating churches like museums, something which clearly stayed with him." Of course, the look of the band was equally influenced by the sound and subject matter of their music, dealing with themes of darkness and notably Satan, with Tobias later explaining, "Very early on, when the material came together in the project phase before it was actually a band, when it was a logo and a couple of songs, it came together by itself because the material and the lyrics sort of screamed an over-the-top commitment to the dark side." On March 12, 2010, Tobias uploaded their free track demo to the band's MySpace page, which consisted of Prime Mover, Death Knell and Ritual. However, tragedy struck the very same day. From out of nowhere, Tobias's older brother Sebastian very suddenly passed away from an undiagnosed heart condition. Tobias later reflected, "It was like, this has happened, there's nothing I can do with it, I've just got to take the ball and run with it, and I've been running with it ever since." After hearing their demo tracks on MySpace, Lee Dorian of Rise Above Records immediately signed the band. This led to their first official photo shoot, which ironically only featured Tobias, with the ghouls being played by neighbours and friends. The initial live lineup of Ghost featured Tobias Forge on vocals, Martin Persner on guitar, Simon Soderberg on lead guitar, Askell Holmgren on drums, Gustav Lindström on bass, and Mauro Rubino on keyboard. Ghost's debut album, Opus Eponymous, Latin for self-titled, went on to be recorded over the course of a number of weeks in Tobias' hometown of Linköping in Sweden. Contrary to their later albums, Opus was predominantly recorded using a Gibson SG, while utilising the mid-range crunch of an orange Thunderverb 50 to achieve an old-school 70s feel. After years of lead-up, the band finally released Opus on the 18th of October 2010 to critical acclaim. With the album art, the band decided to wear their horror influences on their sleeve, literally, with an homage to the poster of the film Salem's Lot, featuring the image of Papa Emeritus looming over a Gothic church. The church in question was Linköping Cathedral, a looming monument of which Tobias would no doubt have been very familiar with growing up in the city. Speaking of the cathedral, he stated, "It felt like a magical place. On the other hand, I think it triggered a lot of the opposition that made me, in my adolescence, so unquestionably throw my hands into the hands of Satan." Of course, you can't talk about Ghost without talking about Satan, with Tobias stating, "I deeply identify with the pop culture Satan. I grew up with it. It's in the music I listened to, the films I watched, the art I saw. He was the perfect father figure for an angry teen who wanted to blow up the world." Ghost has sometimes been criticised as being anti-religious, but this doesn't reflect Tobias' own views. believing it best to leave a person's beliefs up to their own individual choice. Rather than a demonic influence on the masses, Ghost uses the image of Satan and Satanism as a metaphor for the free thinker, the liberated, and an aversion to the close-mindedness seen not just in organised religion, but in many walks of life. Tobias would later say, "What we're really trying to do is to make people happy, and make people feel good about themselves when they come to our show and have a good time."
Yeah.
The release of Opus Eponymous was subsequently followed by their debut live show, just 5 days later at the Hammer of Doom festival in Germany. This was the start of Ghost's meteoric rise to prominence, and was followed by a few years of touring, playing at festivals throughout Europe and the United States, as well as supporting gothic metal band Paradise Lost. This is really where Ghost's attention to detail and focus on theatrics came into their own. Featuring the backdrop of stained glass windows and incense billowing from a thurible, Ghost had taken classic Catholic imagery and cast their satanic eye on it once again.
Okay, the second
By
album.
the summer of 2011, the majority of tracks for their second album were already in place and demoed. Following a lengthy touring period, Ghost returned to their hometown of Linköping for a special performance. During the show, Papa Emeritus I bowed out and left the stage, being subsequently replaced by his successor, Papa Emeritus II. A new era of Ghost was about to begin. To those not in the know, it may have seemed that the band had simply replaced their original singer, but of course, this was just a new and improved costume and persona for Tobias to inhabit. One notable feature of this new Papa, other than the new and improved mask, was the addition of a new costume and staff, featuring the band's now iconic symbol, the crucifix. The change of Papas also came with a new stage set, while the ghouls remained largely unchanged design-wise. It was also around this time that Gustav Lindström left the band and was replaced by Rickard Ottosson on bass guitar. In late 2012, the band announced that their second album, Infestissumam, Latin for most dangerous, specifically referring to the Antichrist, was to be released in 2013. The album was recorded in 2012 at Blackbird Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, with producer Nick Raskelinas, who had previously produced music by Stone Sour, Alice in Chains, and more. It was also their first album to be released on their new record label, Loma Vista Recordings. In contrast to the band's first release, Infestissumam broadened their musical palette, featuring lavish choir arrangements, something which the band faced some difficulty in pulling off. Due to the religious population of Nashville, it was difficult to find a choir who would agree to perform for the album. Instead, the band opted to find a choir in Hollywood to complete the recordings. This would not be the first controversy the band would find themselves a part of. In addition to the broadening sonic horizons, the new album dealt with more advanced themes than Opus, with Tobias stating, "Everything on the first record was about a coming darkness, an impending doom, whereas the new record is about something present, and literally, the new record deals with the presence of the Antichrist, the devil. But subliminally, the meaning of it is more how mankind, predominantly men, what they have deemed to be the presence of the devil, throughout history and even nowadays, and that's why the record is so fueled with sexual themes and females. That's basically it. The Inquisition was basically men accusing women of being the devil just because they had a hard-on for them." The advancement of musical and lyrical ideas was a very deliberate action, something which Ghost became known for through subsequent years, not wanting to stagnate or rest on their laurels. Similar to Opus, the album cover paid homage to the world of film, this time specifically referencing the poster for 1984's Amadeus. This album also marked another first for the band, their first music video. Debuting on the band's YouTube channel on February 19, 2013, Secular Haze was a visual throwback to the 70s music and variety shows, showcasing the retro appeal of the band's music to date. 2 more music videos for Year Zero and Monstrance Clock would be released respectively. The album generally received positive reviews and was praised for its willingness to embrace new sounds and genres. Criticism was, however, levied at the production of the album, something which Tobias later admitted to not being fully satisfied with. Due to legal reasons, the band was forced to change the name to Ghost BC in the US, with the BC referring to Before Christ. Many copies of Infestissumam can be found with the BC logo to this day. Luckily, the band managed to sort out the legal issues by 2015. Ghost toured in support of the album throughout the rest of 2013, including a huge circuit around the US and worldwide. Touring with bands such as Iron Maiden and Slayer helped cement their presence in the eyes of audiences who were unfamiliar with the band. It was during these formative years that Ghost received numerous commendations from metal giants such as James Hetfield of Metallica and Phil Anselmo of Pantera. After nearly a year of touring, the band released a short EP, If You Have Ghost, featuring 4 covers and a live rendition of Secular Haze. It was prior to Infestissumam's release that a chance encounter between Tobias and Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters led to the first recording for this EP, Marionette, Ghost's take on an ABBA classic. Tobias recounted, "We were at a festival in Europe and the Foo Fighters were playing, and we knew that Dave was a fan, and after a few handshakes and a few laughs we were like, okay, so you like the band, so do you want to do something?" And he said yeah, and 1 month later we were in his studio in LA doing that. Dave would go on to produce the entire EP, and played drums on I'm a Marionette and Waiting for the Night, also playing guitar on If You Have Ghosts. Visually, the EP art paid homage to an iconic shot from 1922's Nosferatu. The band would go on to tour for the next year or so throughout Australia, Europe and North America, with the tour ending in 2014. By this point in their career, Ghost had already started to make quite the name for themselves, and the next phase was about to bring an even greater level of recognition. Towards the end of 2014, Ghost started work on their follow-up to Infestissumam, Meliora, Latin for the pursuit of something better, with the goal to focus on a futuristic theme and also to bring the guitar to the forefront in comparison to the more keyboard-laden tracks of the previous album. The band settled on Claes Åhlund as the producer for the album. Despite not being known for metal or hard rock albums, the band chose Claes due to his propensity to produce more pop or rock-oriented music, bringing in a different element compared to what the band had experienced before. Thematically and musically, Meliora was a departure from the sound of the previous album, focusing on more bombastic guitar-driven tracks. The influence of Metallica can perhaps be best heard on this record. Lyrically, the album deals with the topic of the Antichrist coming to power and the absence of God. The album art presented an Art Deco and Futurism-styled church, taking influence from Fritz Lang's 1927 film Metropolis, appropriate for the futuristic theme of the album. This style would also feature in subsequent music videos. Meliora was released on August 21, 2015, to a positive reception and helped to cement their place as one of the foremost rock and metal bands in the last 10 years. The song Cerise won a Grammy the following year for Best Metal Performance,
Cerise,
helping to catapult Ghost even further into the public consciousness. With a new album also came a new Papa, Papa Emeritus 3. On June 3, 2015 in Tobias' hometown of Linköping, Papa 2 officially passed the torch, or in this case the microphone, to his successor. In a strange turn of events, the first two shows that Papa 3 played featured an incorrect mask design. Apparently there was a mix-up with the design and it was too late to change. Papa 3's trademark look soon became known to the public, with official photos adorning magazines and websites across the world. Officially the younger brother by 3 months of Papa 2, Papa 3 brought a newfound exuberance and style to Ghost's live shows. For the first time, Papa discarded his papal robes and performed in a less regal attire, reflecting the more light-hearted and charismatic nature of the character, as opposed to Papa 2's more operatic and ominous presence. In turn came the most drastic redesign of the nameless ghouls so far. Gone were the 16th century Bauta masks, instead replaced by silver devil masks, and more lightweight robes adorned with elemental symbols to denote each individual ghoul. Fire, water, air, earth and ether were the symbols chosen to represent each ghoul. Martin Persner became ether, Simon Soderbergh became fire, Mauro Rubino became air, Martin Hierstedt became earth, and Gustav Lindström became water. The release of Meliora famously saw Papa 3 playing a kazoo. A small US tour was announced shortly after, running from September until November, followed by a subsequent UK tour and another return to North America in 2016. Taking a leaf from Infestissumam's release, the band followed up the album and tour with the announcement of a new EP, Popestar, featuring the breakout track Square Hammer. Popestar mainly consisted of cover tracks, including renditions of songs from Eurythmics and Echo and the Bunnymen. Popestar was released on the 16th of September 2016, the same day as the start of their Popestar tour, continuing all the way to July 2017. The album art by Zbigniew Bielak once again referenced Metropolis, albeit with a Soviet-era style, referenced in the similarity between the Palace of the Soviets, an unbuilt monument, and the monuments adorning the album art. 2017 brought about what was perhaps the most tumultuous event in the history of the band, the infamous lawsuit. Tobias was sued by former Ghost musicians Simon Soderbergh, Mauro Rubino, Martin Hierstedt, and Henrik Palm, in regards to a lack of royalty payments. The 4 musicians who had previously left the band in 2016, for undisclosed reasons, accused Forge of withholding financial information and payments. The four alleged that Forge was aiming to transform Ghost from a band into a solo project with hired musicians. Forge claimed that no legal partnership ever existed between other members and himself. The other members were essentially musicians for hire, being paid a fixed salary. After 6 days in court, a decision was made, and the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. Prior to the trial, the identity of Tobias and other members in the band was a closely guarded secret, with only the best internet sleuths or those in the know being aware of who exactly was a part of Ghost. With the onset of the trial, their personal lives were suddenly made public, with photos of Tobias and the band making their rounds through newspapers and across the internet. It's important to note at this point that the majority of music by Ghost is almost universally written by Tobias, with help from others. However, there were additions to a handful of songs on the early albums, courtesy of Martin Persner. The songs are written, they're either played by Tobias or others on the album recordings, with the Ghouls being hired live musicians for the most part. With the lawsuit in the rear-view mirror, Tobias pushed on ahead with the band's next release, a live album, Ceremony and Devotion. Released on the 8th of December 2017, the album featured 15 live tracks from the band's show in San Francisco during their North American tour of 2017. Once again, the artwork paid homage to Metropolis, with the art being somewhat of a recreation of the scene where Maria, the robot, is being powered up in her chair, with the previous Papas providing power to Papa 3. During the last show of Ghost's 2017 tour, Papa Emeritus 3 was forcibly removed from the stage, with an elderly, ominous figure appearing from the shadows. This was a character who up to this point had never been seen before. The old man declared, "I am Papa Emeritus 0. The party is over, and now a new era begins.
Whoa.
The Middle Ages begin now."
Prequelle.
Recording sessions for the next Ghost album began in 2017 in Stockholm, with Tobias opting to employ producer Tom Dalgetty, who had produced the Popestar EP. Dalgetty is known for his work with the Pixies, Royal Blood, Rammstein, and more, with Tobias stating that the new recording sessions were very relaxed in comparison to the Meliora sessions. In contrast to Meliora, the new album, Prequelle, prominently featured the use of piano, with the guitars being pushed further back in the arrangements. Musically, the album continued to grow from Meliora and focused even more intently on creating songs with larger-than-life choruses and a more grandiose feel. Lyrically, the album deals with themes of survival, the medieval plague, and the Black Death. The album art effectively reflects the themes of the lyrics, showing a medieval landscape and what appears to be the gaping maw of hell inside a rat's mouth nonetheless, atop which sits a satanic pope, directly referencing a portrait of Pope Innocent X. It's interesting to note that there are variations of the album art, each featuring the horse and rider in a different position, likely to represent the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Prequelle was released on June 1st, 2018, and as with all previous albums, it featured the onset of a new frontman for the band. However, this time there was a slight difference to proceedings. On the 31st of March 2018, prior to the release of the album, instead of being greeted by a new Papa, fans were introduced to Cardinal Copia, an underling in the Ghost clergy, someone who hadn't yet attained the rank of Papa. Gone was the black and white corpse paint, instead replaced by a realistic mask with blackened eyes, with signature white contact lens. Another character introduced was that of Papa Nil, the first Papa that we know of, a Papa from whom all previous Papas had descended, apart from Cardinal Copia, seemingly. Also thrust further into the limelight was the character of Sister Impera, seemingly the de facto leader of the clergy. The character had been portrayed by numerous actors throughout the band's history, something which has become somewhat of a running joke, but almost always serves the purpose of propelling the story along, whether it be through tour announcements or album releases. The band would once again embark on a global tour, featuring a new lineup named Ghouls. In an evolution of their Meliora design, the Ghouls would don their signature silver masks, this time featuring cutouts to make it easier to sing. In addition to the standard 2 guitar, bass and drum Ghouls, they would now be joined by 2 female Ghouls, or Ghoulettes, on keyboards and backing vocals, as well and props. During live performances of Miasma, Papa Nil would walk on stage to play saxophone, but this wasn't the character's only time in the limelight. Ghost would yet again follow tradition by releasing an EP, this time titled 7 Inches of Satanic Panic. This EP would serve the purpose of introducing a lost chapter of Ghost lore, with the music video for Kiss the Go-Go showcasing a young Papa Nil back in the 60s. The artwork for the EP would be suitably psychedelic to reflect the period. Musically, the 2 tracks on the EP would echo an older, more 60s or 70s influenced sound akin to the Rolling Stones and the Doors. Throughout the Prequelle album cycle, Ghost had leaned heavily into producing chapter videos, short videos intended to fill in the lore of the band, something that they had experimented with to varying degrees previously. Tobias later went on to say that in regard to building a larger narrative for the world of Ghost, we're still a rock band, and it's there for fun, but yeah, the intention is to, in one way or form, tell that story, and if it becomes a film one day, potentially. Ghost would continue to tour up until their fateful show on the 20th of March 2020, a Mexico City show entitled A Final Gig Named Death. Rumours were rife that something monumental was poised to happen, and lo and behold, the rumours were true. During the song Miasma, Papa Nil was shown to have collapsed and passed away. Of course, in the lore of the band there must always be a Papa, and so Cardinal Copia's time had come. He ascended and donned his new papal robes and face paint.
Whoa.
Papa Emeritus IV was finally here. Like some sort of twisted prophecy, all the tales of the Black Death and the Plague preceded the very real global coronavirus pandemic, which effectively put Ghost into a temporary hiatus, much like every other touring musician. Tobias used this downtime to start work on the follow-up to Prequelle. The next major Ghost release coincided with the release of the movie Halloween Kills. Originally intended for release a year prior, the movie was pushed back to October 2021, with Ghost debuting the song Hunter's Moon in tandem. The music video and tie-in to the movie was an extension of Tobias's love for horror movies, especially those from the 80s.
Yeah.
Interestingly, 2 versions of the track were released in the album. Due to the delay in the release of Hunter's Moon, Tobias had the chance to change and re-record the track, being unsatisfied with the first version.
Impera, yeah, this album.
The seeds for the follow-up to Prequelle took hold many years prior to its release, with Tobias stating that he had acquired a book called The Rule of Empires, Those Who Built Them, Those Who Endured Them, and Why They Always Fall by Timothy Parsons. This book, as well as the political landscape at the time, helped to inspire an album about, in Tobias's words, the rise and ultimately the unescapable fails and falls of empires. In October of 2020, Tobias would enter the studio to begin writing and pre-production on a new album, Impera. Recording would start in January of the following year, with Tobias stating, "We won't release an album until we know that we are actually going on tour," implying that even after the record was completed, there may be a delay in its release. On this album, the choice was made once again to work with producer Klaas Orland. However, this wasn't the original plan. Instead, Tobias said, "The American producer who was supposed to make the record couldn't come because of the travel restrictions, and I couldn't go to America." At this point in the history of Ghost, it was well known that Tobias liked to work with other musicians when it came to recording each album. Drummer Ludwig Kenberg has featured in an unknown number of Ghost records, but appears on Impera and Prequelle at the very least.
Okay.
And keyboardist Salem Al-Fakir is another favourite of Tobias's. Tobias tends to record varying amounts of guitar on the records, but primarily the vocals. For Impera, however, Tobias decided to feature the talents of Opeth's Frederick Akesson on guitar, stating, "I'm going to be very, very, very specific and very, very picky. We went through a bit of a phase where I was trying Frederick out just to see how well he could adapt."
Okay.
Tobias was impressed, and Frederick was recruited for the album. Impera was released on the 11th of March 2022, to near universal acclaim. Musically, the album featured a natural evolution of the more theatrical songs from Prequelle. In contrast to Prequelle, however, guitars are more prominently showcased. Comparisons to Def Leppard and other arena rock bands of the 80s were abound,
Okay.
with the songs displaying massive choruses and shredding guitar solos
Yeah, that's
courtesy of
true.
Frederick.
That is so true.
Impera was undeniably Ghost's most successful album to date, debuting at number 1 in the album charts in multiple countries, and reaching lofty heights elsewhere. It was also the band's highest charting album to date in both the US and UK. Lyrically, the album stays true to the theme of the rise and fall of empires, with songs such as Kaisarion and Griftwood dealing with historic and contemporary empires respectively. The album art directly references a famous photo of English occultist Aleister Crowley, and calls to mind the iconic album art of Iron Maiden, specifically Power Slave. It features a gigantic monolith to Papa Emeritus, inside what appears to be some sort of Victorian/steampunk church, and a city in the background, calling back to the themes of empires and rulers. As with other album releases, Impera also introduced a new design for the nameless ghouls, gone with the chrome devil masks, instead replaced by a new steampunk aesthetic, and Victorian-styled totalitarian uniforms, to reflect the visual and lyrical topics of the album. In addition to the 7 ghouls featured on the previous tour, another joined the stage on backing vocals, resulting in a total of 8 ghouls on stage. In January 2022, Ghost officially kicked off their Impera tour, with the tour carrying on well into 2023. An ominous chapter video was released during the midst of the tour, entitled Chapter 16, Tax Season, which many seem to think hinted towards the end of Papa 4's reign. This chapter video also coincided with the announcement of a special tour date, which was eventually extended to 2 shows in Los Angeles. Interestingly, the shows were notable for being camera and phone free, likely due to the shows being recorded for a future release. In 2023, an image of Papa 4 with the words, "Jesus is coming," cropped up in LA. And after months of cryptic Jesus teasing, a video for Jesus He Knows Me, a cover of the Genesis song, was released mid-April. This coincided with the announcement of a new EP, Phantomime, a covers EP in the tradition of their earlier releases. This was to feature tracks by Iron Maiden, Tina Turner, and more. The cover art was designed by Hedy Zant in full-scale 3D form, rather than a flat image, featuring a cyber papa with a metallic and neon construction, with the pose once again referencing Aleister Crowley.
Whoa.
It remains to be seen what is next for Ghost, but if Impera has taught us anything, it's that history likes to repeat itself. Tobias himself has said, "Well, I mean, everything always changes, nothing ever lasts forever." Regarding the demise of Papa 4 and change in general, he mused, "I think that is an unavoidable fact. I and everyone else deal with this all the time, this fluidity of being amid the ever-moving process of time and how things naturally sort of wither and fade away or fall apart." Ominously, he added, "Everything has its circuit, and things will always come to pass. We just need to deal with them, right? Does that mean it ends? No, it means that there's just a new face to it." So while we wait to see what kinds of devilish ideas Tobias has to unleash onto the world, we can be safe in the knowledge that Ghost have created a rich legacy for themselves, a legacy that continues to fascinate and inspire in equal measures, a band unlike any other. And if you have Ghost, you have everything.
Yeah. Wow. 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 Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. All right, guys. Yes, like I said, I mean, I've been listening to Ghost. I love their music, and I'm definitely a fan. Like I said, I bumped into the video, and I had to, watch it, just to get a little bit of insight about the band and then their journey. And I have to say, this video was pretty, insightful. Gave me a little bit of, knowledge. Where it started from, where they are now, and I mean, it's the growth is just. I'm inspired. Basically, what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So shout outs to Heads TV, for this documentary, this video. I really, really enjoyed watching it. So, guys, if you stuck with me to the end of the video, let me know what you think about this video. So, information is accurate and all of that. Please let me know down in the comment section. But I mean, seems accurate to me. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you'd like for me to react to next, guys. I don't know. I'll definitely be here to do the needful. My name is Philip, and also the next music reaction. Take care, stay safe, peace out.